Welcome back, folks. It looks like it's time to take this Thermoquad carburetor apart and show you what's hiding inside. Okay then, what I did not too long ago was I got most of the things out of the way to speed things up in taking this apart. Namely, there's 10 long screws that secure the top or the air horn to the rest of the unit. There are two of them hiding right in here. There's other carburetors that have the same kind of thing going on where they'll be hiding behind the choke plate, and you'll actually have people trying to pry the top off with a wedge screwdriver or what have you. Don't do it, you'll just wreck it. So always look for those little hidden screws. They're all out, there's 10 of them, 2 of them being like I just told you now. What we can do is start taking the top of this thing off and show you what's hiding inside now. Lift it straight up. There's the air horn. You flip it over. And what we have there is the float. Controls the level of the fuel in the float bowl. There's one over here which I took out in order to show you the wind-up spring for the secondary air valve. It's adjustable on the end with a lock ring and a screw to adjust it. You can adjust the torsion or tension, if you will. It looks like there have been some upgrades to this carburetor. They're either manufactured at a later date or it was rebuilt somewhere along the line. I actually bought this carburetor for $25 just for spare parts, namely the main jets on the primary side and the metering rods. But I found out there's a whole lot more I could use as well. They've upgraded the check valve in the accelerator pump housing here. The original one that I've seen is a stamped steel one with sort of an orange rubber in there, and they basically just dry up and then you'd have no squirt at all for your accelerator pump. Now this is a really good one. It's machined brass and it has a steel ball bearing in it. When it actuates, the fuel actually comes right through this tube and into the squirter, which is on top. I'll get into more detail a little long when we maybe start heading towards the rebuild or what have you. These are the secondary spray bars that I had mentioned in the first video. These are the secondary jets, very different from most carbs you've seen. Secondary jets, most carbs actually screw down into the float bowl. These ones are actually in the air horn. They just unscrew, and then there's a rod inside, a hollow rod with the air bleeds. We can get onto that later in a future video. But there you have it for the inside there. Also, there's the step-up rod for the metering rod tree, and I had mentioned in the first video that there's a cam that actuated that. It sits on the primary throttle shaft. We'll be getting to that soon. Vacuum actually holds that rod down. There's a piston just above where you can't see it in the casting. Most carbs, this will relax because of the spring overcoming the vacuum signal, whereas this one, like I had mentioned in the first video, has a cam on the primary throttle shaft and it forces a rich mixture as you start cranking in more throttle. Okay, we'll just set that aside for now. Oh, it's a dual float bowl configuration. It's not like the Rochester you've seen with a single float. This one can get plenty of fuel in the float bowls. Here's the phenolic resin body center section I was telling you about in the first video. There's things to watch out for this if you ever happen to rebuild or find out a problem to one. Namely, down in here, down in there's 2 little O-rings, special ones. The earlier ones were kind of a leathery material, and they tended to dry up, especially if you let the vehicle sit without fuel in it, and you would have a leak. It would basically come through the fuel bowl up through, and because this part here is lower, it would just trickle in here and you'd have a really rich running carb. I've got a sample of that ring here. It's just a little O-ring. This is an improved model. It has little channels in it. It's not just flat. Channels on both sides as well as on the inside and outside, so it squeezes better and seals better, so you don't get that leak I had mentioned. Okay, in here there's the baffle. That helps the venturi effect in the secondaries. It's just a punch steel plate, nothing really special, just as to location that is special. Okay, I'll put that aside so it doesn't jump out. You can just take this off. Like I say, it comes off in 3 sections. While I'm at it thinking about it, you can actually leave the base of the throttle body of this carburetor bolted to your manifold and get these other 2 sections off without any trouble whatsoever, and I've done it several times. There you have it. That's where the fuel sits. The primary metering jets just screw in there. I've already taken them out. One that side, one that side. They just screw in. On the other side of this thing, there are some noted problems that people have had. I've never had them myself, but these little caps here are for a fuel channel from the float bowl. And this epoxy or whatever kind of a bonding agent they used here tends to start leaking or gives up the ghost. So basically you just clean it up, sand it down, and get some good epoxy and put them back on. Nothing special. People always also rather have said how these things can crack and warp and whatnot. I've never had that problem. Don't know what is causing it, but this one looks like it's a keeper too. And that's the center section. Now for the throttle body. In the first video I'd mentioned that there was a cam, as with I probably mentioned it just a few minutes ago on here. When you actuate the primary throttle shaft, meaning put your foot on the gas pedal, it would make that metering rod tree rise, and I'll explain how that happens. That rod, if you will, it actuates, it sits right on here, on the end of this lever. And I'll flip that back now to show you what's hiding underneath there. There's the cam, the famous cam that these things are noted for. If you look closely, you can see the cam actually moving. Now with this in place, you can actually see the action. It actually comes up whenever you apply throttle, so it's forcing a rich mixture from the metering rods pulling out of the main metering jets. I've left this gasket in place. It's stuck pretty good, but that's not the reason. The reason is I want to keep this thing together so it doesn't break that center section, that phenolic resin float bowl. So this acts as a cushion when it's sitting around doing nothing. This one, I don't know if someone got mad or what, but the primary throttle shaft is bent here. It looks like they threw it like a football out of anger or something. However, that's not my concern. I'm after it for other parts. Another thing while I think about it is this secondary choke pull-off. I've had problems with it in the past where the secondary air door wouldn't open. These things, when they get old, they tend to stick and it will not open. And it's the same thing when you control the choke as well when it's cold. If you get your foot into it, it's supposed to open up and let a little bit more air in, whereas it would just choke it off and no air would flow. So keep these things fresh, no matter what carburetor you're talking about. Don't let them get too old or you'll have trouble. This one apparently looks like it might have been in a carb fire. I don't know if you can see in the detail that you're watching, but it's blue here. Looks like you had a bit of a fire there. It can happen. That's why you want to keep them fresh and rebuilt. You don't want to let them get too old before they start to give you problems like that. There's the underside of it. There's another thing that they did here that I haven't seen on any other carburetor. They've put this really strong return spring. It's coiled around the primary throttle shaft here to make sure that the thing closes up when you let off the gas. You really have to put some force behind that to get it to actuate. They weren't fooling around when they made this one. Okay, let's get back now to I'll show you how the secondaries work on this with the float bowl in place. Flip her over. Alright, then I'd also mentioned in the first video that there were some secondary spray bars. There's these little brass rods in here. They're hollow and they have air bleeds and a place for the fuel to come out as well. They don't actuate until the secondary throttle plates start to open. And once there's enough airflow and enough vacuum drop in order for that choke pull off to let the air door start actuating, it'll start to come in. Say if you were really on it hard and you wanted to go fast, this would probably come right to the stop. And as you can see there, like I mentioned in the first video, these actually form a venturi. The secondary air door, unlike most others, is curved. It works kind of like a megaphone as the air is flowing from the other side. Remember, we're upside down looking from the engine side of this thing. As it gets closer to the spray bars, it's kind of like a megaphone effect. It'll actually concentrate the fuel draw and everything towards the center of the bore in the manifold and through the carburetor itself. That's it for that part. It's quite well built, actually, aside from the problems other people had with the float bowl warping or cracking or what have you. Like I say, I've never had that problem, but you can see it's looks dual or triple venturi, so that on the primaries these are really economical. They really function well as far as I've experienced in the past. And about, like I mentioned about the fuel flow, there's two float chambers, one on each side. The fuel line connects up here. It's usually a steel flared fuel line that goes in here with a nut. So you've got fuel flowing through this hollow channel here and into this float bowl, and it turns around here and it goes into this float bowl. So you've got twice the capacity. As long as your fuel pump can feed it, this thing will never run short on gas when you're really making that engine scream. So that's the second installment of this. Future videos, so I'll be going into a little more detail with the different aspects and things to look out for, setups and whatnot. So have a nice day, folks, and bye for now.